Okay, we're live. Welcome to another episode of the Tom and John Show. Once again, sans Tom. He's not out fishing. I think his computer crashed or something. So I will take over the show. I'm John Kaminsky. I'm an assistant professor, or actually I'm an associate professor at Penn State, and I run the 2-year program. And joining me today are the co-founders, I guess, the founder and co-founder of On Golf, which is a pretty exciting new platform, Matt Shaffer and Walt Norley. Matt, I'll introduce you first, and you can follow up if I screw anything up. But Matt is the director of golf course operations at Merion Golf Club, has hosted the 2005 Amateur, the 2009 Walker Cup, and then most recently the 2013 U.S. Open, which we all remember Matt being interviewed by, was it the Golf Channel or was it NBC? I don't remember who. And they asked you, sorry, that was Tom calling, trying to figure it out. They asked you what did they ask you? Something about what if somebody goes really low, and what did you say?
It's not going to happen.
Yeah, and it was great. It was like, oh, that's not going to happen. Was it Brandon Chambly? He was just like,
Yeah, I was glad it didn't happen, or I would have had some egg on my face, but it turned out well.
Yeah. So you're a co-founder with Walt, and Walt, you're the CEO of On Golf and a graduate of the University of Georgia, correct?
Yes.
University of Georgia. And I guess to reiterate some of your background, you were the founder of Advanced Sensor Technology, which now everybody knows as UGMO sensors. So that was probably, I would assume, and that's what we'll talk about, but I would assume that was kind of a precursor to now what is On Golf. So what I'd like to do maybe is just start off by talking about how you two met and how you two decided to come up with the idea for what is now this cloud-based, I don't even know how you describe it. So that's what we want to find out.
I'll describe it. Okay. So it's a cloud-based decision platform. Matt and I met through the sensor process. Actually, I would give Matt quite a bit of credit for our overall development of the UGMO sensor system for golf. It was 2005, and Matt was getting ready to host with Merion the U.S. Amateur in August, and it was a dreadful summer. It was one of those summers where more than a few superintendents in the community lost their jobs. It was that dreadful. And Paul Latchall Sr. was working with me on the sensor products and helping us get it out into the marketplace. And I guess he went into Matt and said, with all the stress he was going through with the hot, humid conditions and a lot of moisture, that you ought to put these sensors in the ground. And I remember Matt's reaction. I didn't know Matt at the time, and Matt's reaction was like, "Really? I've got all this stuff going on, and you're trying to push a new product on me?" And at the end of the day, you did it. And I'll let you say, I mean, it did. It changed a lot of things, which led to our relationship being what it is, not only from a professional standpoint, but from a friendship perspective, because and I didn't think it would ever be as profound as it was on somebody with Matt's, tenure and stature within this business.
Without a doubt, it changed the most. It's probably the biggest thing that changed how I grow grass, because I had this 100% perception that I knew exactly what was going on, when in fact I really didn't know what was going on. I didn't know the most advantageous times, for instance, to cut our greens. And we discovered that the coolest time of the day, which I was thoroughly convinced was like 6 a.m., was in fact 3 a.m. And so we started cutting greens at 3 a.m. And the results were just dramatic, how much less stress was on the greens. And then we never really were able to, we never knew what dry was. We had a theory of what it was, but then certainly once we had the sensors, we could quantify that. And that was really, that was the start of where we are today with On Golf.
I think, John, I mean, it was a natural evolution. I mean, what I learned as a non-agronomist business guy was that even great golf course superintendents like Matt and some of his colleagues that are in that same sphere, making decisions without having information, making decisions without having data. And once we got through the process on the sensor development of, the wireless component, both, below surface, and then the calibration and all the different soil types with the sensors for moisture, temperature, and salinity. Once we got through that, and the above ground network, I mean, it was a from scratch effort. Once we got through that, we realized it's about the information. And so we focused on the user experience with the information, and what we discovered, and I'm going from 2005 all the way up to 2009, it's a piece of the puzzle. So even though we did something that was compelling and pioneering, and companies like Turo and Stevens and Spectrum right now are the beneficiaries of that, ultimately what clicked with me was that it's the information, and then how do you correlate that with the other operational inputs, whether they're agronomic or pure operational, like equipment, labor, et cetera. How do you take that information and make it more meaningful? So the fast forward with On Golf was Matt and I, UGMO left the golf business in 2010 to go into the residential commercial markets and focused on that, but bigger markets, quite frankly, and a hardware device play, not an information play. Matt and I maintained our relationship. I started looking at, literally as an investor, hundreds of companies out there in, the smarter information world, and a lot of it was in the ag world. I'm a water guy just because of what we did with the UGMO stuff, and I gravitate to that. But when I looked at all these companies, whether they were West Coast based or Southeast based or Northeast based, one of the common threads that I saw was that an intelligence platform to make, true operational decisions was those were the companies that were making a difference. They were changing behaviors within their industry. The businesses were scaling, and I'm sharing a lot of this with Matt. Been involved with IBM Smarter Cities now for quite a bit of time, and at one point in time, for 2 or 3 years, I was on their advisory board with a focus on the water. So because of IBM and the investment groups I was working with, I got exposed to a lot of great things, and I'd come back and I'd talk to Matt about it. And Matt convinced me that golf in 2014 was ready to adopt technology, had started to adopt technologies that were creating decision making based on information and insight, as opposed to arbitrary gut touch feel decisions. So I got introduced to through IBM, a company in Fresno, California, On Farm, and I took a look. I was just struck by what they were providing the growers and the farmers, which was the aggregation of every input on the farm, integrating and pushing it up into a cloud software platform, and then having that customized so that a grower of almonds could manage the way he wants to manage, and a grower of avocados, hypothetically, could manage the way that he or she wanted to manage. And so it wasn't software that you were stuck with. And I shared that with Matt, and I said, well, I had my own gut feeling, but I didn't want to say anything. And I said, what do you think? Does this correlate over to golf? And your reaction was?
Oh man, I couldn't believe it. I saw it instantly, and I was just like, oh my goodness, if we just change the language just a little bit, we can customize it for turf. And I knew it was powerful when we saw it, but I never realized just how powerful it was until we started using it.
Yeah, we'll get to that too. I want to have you guys share your screen at some point, but touch a little bit about who can benefit from this. Like, who's it going to be geared to? Like, not everybody is Merion, so obviously you've got to have it a thought process in terms of how this is going to benefit a smaller course, a bigger course, a lot of different groups. So I'm just kind of curious, and maybe this kind of plays into, tell us about what it does. Obviously, if you have the former UGMO sensors, that's one component of On Golf, and that's not even a component, but I mean, soil moisture is one small component of all that On Golf does. So maybe just kind of talk a little bit about that and what it does, what it actually does.
Yeah, so to bring it down from 30,000 feet, I think, the best way to describe it holistically, it is a decision platform And it's taking, so you don't have to buy that. So it's for everybody. We think this is, and that's a little bit of not only the values you get out of it, but also the pricing. So it's, you know, our business model is to change golf through insights, actionable insights and data that you currently have on your property. So it is soil moisture information, it's your pump water information that you currently have, it's your irrigation information. We have our own weather service, and it's a best-in-class weather service that our partner On Farm is using for the growers, with you know, more reliable forecasting for storm fronts. So when you combine the weather, the soil, the water, the irrigation, we have a labor app. We literally can monitor golf carts. So it's not limited. And you know, if you're a municipality with a lower budget, and we're going to help you manage what you have on that property, from the irrigation correlated with the pump water information, to soil sensor information. The soil sensor information world today has changed dramatically from when I was in the market 10 years ago, because frankly, with the handhelds, it's affordable. You know, it's not a luxury item. You know, that's why they're prolific. They're prolific because they're affordable, and you can use your existing labor pool to go out, measure, and monitor. We're just taking that information they're doing today, and we're putting it through this, you know, in the field. You're putting in that information as opposed to writing it on a clipboard. We're putting it into some other spreadsheet, and then go back to your desktop and doing a double entry. So that all goes away.
So is it, and it's probably both as far as I've seen, it's probably both. I mean, is the idea behind this that it's going to save the golf courses money, or is the idea behind it that it's going to save maybe the golf course superintendent some level of stress and provide information? Which one's more important? I guess it depends on who you are.
That's right. I mean, I think like there's always demands for money. And so consequently, most superintendents have issues regarding labor or not enough water, not enough money. But I think they'll be able to reallocate their dollars into areas that they didn't think they could, because they're making better decisions predicated on data. The other problem with this business, and it's the one thing I see, it's why there's not a lot of people in this business in their 60s. And it's really because it's just such a monumental sacrifice of time. And it's really hard on guys when they need to be 3 places at once. Primarily, they're missing their children's soccer game, or they just feel like they can't get unplugged. And this will keep them plugged in to some degree. I mean, they'll have somebody at the course taking data, monitoring the greens, and then you get alerts. So you set up a threshold, and the superintendent will set that threshold up. And then when the green or whatever it is that you're managing, or that you created a widget for, goes out of that threshold, it'll prompt his telephone. Then all he has to do is reach back to the club and say, hey, what's the problem on number 6 green? Or, did you realize that Joe's got, already had 10 hours overtime, he's still at work? And, so it'll keep him plugged in when he's where he needs to be, which is with his family.
Yeah, that's. I heard. I was at the little gathering you had at GIS, and Sam Green mentioned just that. I mean, that was one of the things he talked about. Is if I had this system when I was a superintendent, I might have made more baseball games and softball games for my kids and done some things. So to me, obviously, money is a big one. That's what clubs look at. But to me, that is like a game changer for people, especially as I deal with all these students now, and we have what I think is an elite group of students, but they still are changing in their mentality of what they want to do career-wise. And a lot of them are saying, like, I want a life too. Like, I don't want to just be on a golf course 100 hours a week. I need a life. So you mentioned the alerts. You mentioned kind of it's a cloud-based data gathering platform. Can you share your screen? We had talked about that. Can you share your screen and maybe just show people what the back end looks like, and how maybe Matt, how you're using it? I think that would be helpful.
you hear us, John?
I can. Hey, Walt, I have a question for you. Who's Sarah Powers? Is that one of your employees?
Yeah.
Hi, Sarah. I think she's watching.
Good for you, Sarah. Hang on, and I've got to do what I got to minimize this. Sorry.
You know, just so while you're on there, John, it's amazing already at Merion, like how it's changed how we operate. Like it's no secret we're championship golf, and not even last year there was lots and lots of nights that we had everybody work until 7:30. You know, one of our biggest problems now at Merion, since we streamlined our operation, is that our interns aren't getting a lot of overtime. And in fact, you know, we're working a tight week. You know, they're only getting like 48 hours.
Wow.
So, you know, that's kind of cool in a way when you think about it, when in fact, you know, not even 2 years ago, they were working 65 and 70 hours.
So that's a direct benefit. I mean, from a standpoint of numbers and stuff. But it was funny. Walt was scrolling through your numbers, and I was looking at your green speeds on some of those. I was just like, oh my God.
You slowed them down.
Yeah, slowed them down to 14.
So here's, you know, like Merion's obviously about, you know, championship conditioning on a daily basis. And, you know, through, you know, a lot of research at Merion, we were double cutting every day with 11 blade reels. And we decided to go to 14 blade reels and go single cut. And then we monitored the data, and you can see that we're staying, you know, pretty consistent in the mid-13s with our green speeds. You know, it's funny, John. You know, this thing changes the way you think. It just does. Like we know now that there's days when you would do things. I would do things prior to try to achieve a green speed when in fact it just positively wasn't attainable, and I never was really sure why, and now I know exactly why, and it was because of relative humidity. There's days when we just can't get our greens any faster than we actually want them, and it's really because it's a factor of relative humidity. It just slows our green speeds down. And I told Walt, like this morning, it was like I had this grand epiphany, but I'm positive other superintendents know it. But we left our fans on last night, and our green speeds picked up 8 inches. You know, and in the end, it's just all about, it's because, you know, we dried up the 1/4 inch, and it just became a little crusty. But, you know, and somebody will say, well, how does On Golf, you know, how did that do that? Well, On Golf is really all about collecting data and looking at correlations. So consequently, we were out there. Possibly we wouldn't have been out there doing all these things had we not had On Golf. But we made that connection. Now, for me, obviously, I get paid a lot of money to produce unrealistic conditions on a daily basis. But, you know, it'd be nice to have plant health as well. I told our superintendent, Mike Kachurak, today, these are definitely, I would have thought these are my greens, except for one thing. I said, my greens used to produce or perform like this all the time, but they were brown. And today our greens look really healthy. And I think that's because we run tighter on moisture. We know the correlation between adequate moisture, firmness, green speed, and we're getting data to support those decisions. And the weather. The weather's a big deal. Now, the other thing is that I'll share real quickly is the cost of golf, even at Merion, is really can get problematic. I mean, it's growing quickly. When your budget gets really big, 1% turns into a radical number. And so I'm trying to drive the cost of golf down at Merion, and I'm using the data that On Golf produces to give me a comfort level not to spray. And, you know, it's high-stakes poker. We're number 5, you know, so it's really risky to do what we're doing, but I have a comfort level with the software program. You know, right now we're 212 days out on our fairways at Merion. We don't even have a growth regulator on. When I say we have no chemistry in our fairways, I mean we have no chemistry in our fairways.
But you wouldn't do that without having information. In other words, you wouldn't do that just arbitrarily.
No, not at all. And then the other thing is, you know, there's one other item is right here, he's on percolation. Now, right after the U.S. Open, obviously we had a torrential downpour. We had just unrealistic weather, and after it was all over, the members said, perhaps we should consider rebuilding the greens. And I guess I was apprehensive. I didn't know whether we should or we shouldn't. I mean, the greens are 100 years old, and they're highly modified, but nonetheless, you know, they have XGD top-down drainage, but they certainly don't perform like a USGA green. However, they have some nuances that aren't just commonly found in other greens. And that being, you know, they play different because of the orientation that they're at. They're not at all homogeneous stands of grass. So the only thing that's consistent about them is that they're inconsistent. And so I was nervous about that. So we started taking percolation tests. And in the spring, after, you know, aerification in the late fall, they were moving a tremendous amount of water. And I showed this data to our greens committee, and they were taken back, to say the least. And now I'm not sure that rebuilding greens at Merion is as big a deal as it was before. So, you know, how does that translate into money? Well, at Merion, if I do anything, I over-engineer it. So if we were going to rebuild greens, we were definitely going to figure out how to put hydronics under them, you know, subsurface aeration. I wasn't going to leave anything out of the bag, so the bill more than likely be somewhere between $1.8 and $2 million.
Right.
So there's, you know, so like the other thing too is Walt and I talk about this incessantly, and I think we know that with people like yourself working with this data, and when we get a good data pool, we can actually start working towards plant health and playability, and get some parallaxes in between those things, where we can optimize playability without compromising turf, utilizing on-golf database. Pretty big stuff, I would have to say. You know, most superintendents realize that they can do it for a short period of time, but most all of us, myself included, prior to having this program, were not very comfortable doing it for a long period of time. But I mean, I think now I don't really have any. I actually will be disappointed if we can't run greens at 13.5 to 14.1 right through the entire summer.
Well, you're bouncing around to a few things, and I know that you have it set up that Mike can go into his dashboard and he has access to customize that any way that he wants. So you're talking about how you use it, but Walt, why don't you chime in and talk a little bit about the functionality of the system in itself? I know that you've got a dashboard and you've got these widgets, and they're all customizable. What are people doing in terms of customizing this? Like, what kind of information is automated? What kind of information can be manually put in? I'm assuming that the green speeds and true firm information is, you know, manually put in either through a cell phone or something out on the course. Maybe just talk a little bit about this dashboard and what we're looking at.
Yeah, sure. I'll answer that in two ways. So one is these are what I'm scrolling to now are called dashboards, and they are customizable, and all of our users right now they're customizing them all differently. I could show you that you know, 3 or 4 others, and what they have in common is they're all different. Some are looking at it from an overview perspective. They take it down by holes. We have parties that have set up disease management, tissue reports, water and power. Just a weather dashboard, just a soil moisture dashboard. So it varies, and you know, it really goes to what that particular superintendent or one of their assistants, because we have multiple users per the golf course, and they can all see it differently. So what Matt has set up is from his perspective, but what Mike has set up is primarily of what Mike's interested in, and he's measuring, and you know, how he's managed as well, I assume, from Matt. And we see that consistently from, you know, Adam Zubek up in Ontario, or we see it from Desert Mountain with Sean Emerson and his staff. So up top here we have the various modules. This is a dashboard that we're on right now. Some people use the scheduler. I think if I pop this up right now, I wouldn't see much, but we've had people, again, the premise of having the entire operations of your property and your course in one place is our drive, and we're about 90% there. So if I hit the scheduler for right here for Desert Mountain, for instance, because Sean Emerson at Desert Mountain's used it the longest. He started with this season in January. He's not doing spreadsheets. He's not doing whiteboards to schedule his chemical applications or his nutrient programs. He's doing it right here. You have a map. You have some other nice bells and whistles. This is a really nice communications tool that we have people using it. You can see Matt has some stuff set up here, and it's time stamped. It's essentially an internal chat room for the users of the platform, so that you can timestamp. You can actually take pictures. You can post it. Matt could hypothetically not work this weekend and go on there, and he can see that somebody was hypothetically out there on number 6, and there was something running, or there was something there was some kind of a degradation of turf, and you can take a picture and you can see it, and you can see who was doing what. And so it's a nice internal communications program. This is where you see, in a simple view, this is where you see your, I pulled up the wrong thing, I apologize. This is where you see what you've set up with alerts and alarms. Matt mentioned it earlier, and I'm going to try to drill into it where I can see it. We have widgets within so these alerts and alarms, this is a summary of what you'd have set up, so that when you're out of threshold, you'd get a text message or an email that would say, hypothetically, you set up a humidity threshold, and the humidity level is now outside that threshold, do something about it. Or you're outside your moisture threshold, you get alerted, do something about it. Literally, with our system, as opposed to just a sensor system, you can set that threshold and alert and alarm program up for literally everything. You know, when the labor app comes out here in a month, you're setting alerts and alarms up for labor. You could do that with disease correlations. So, closing out on this, these are widgets right here. This historic, current, and forecast weather. This would be a widget that you'd set up. It's a multi-widget. Multi means multiple data points. Here, this is set up obviously for weather variables that Matt's interested in. It down here, he's got an agronomic widget set up for moisture. Well, he's got it with playability, so he has moisture, speed, and then he's interested in the relevance of precip with that. This is actually this is a good widget. And then he's got his pump information. He's got his water information all in one window. And then here you go. Here's one for the Green Committee, budget and conditions. So he's got his moisture level, his speeds, his inventory. What's the inventory? IPM. That's your pesticides, right? That's right. Pesticides management. So he can see that all in one place, and then he's got his monthly operating. I assume that's is that dollars? Mm-hmm. And then his pump information, and so he's got a mixture between playing conditions. That's kind of a Green Committee dream scorecard right there, isn't it? Right. So that's a widget. That's a multiple widget. Over here on the right, this is a single widget. So I just want to see and set my threshold up for how much water I'm using. He has a low parameter and he has a high parameter, and when he gets out of either one of them, he's going to be notified. I assume my intuition on this would be if you get too high here, either something's amiss, and then if you get an alarm on the large side, that means it's not running. Right. Would that be right? Yeah, and here I guess again I would never have thought this before we started this business, that somebody would set up an alert and alarm to playing conditions, but they are, because when they get too slow, I guess they want to be notified so you can do something about it. And I guess on the flip side, if they get too fast, you'd want to be notified because I guess you want to slow them down, right?
That's correct.
Yeah.
Can you go to the 10th hole or one of the holes? Is there a map function in there too that you can see the overview of the?
Matt didn't set that up on Merion. Sean has that. The other group that's I'm more familiar with in terms of dashboard. I'm going back into Mike's because Mike stores a tremendous amount of data here. I'll go into the 10th hole and what he says. So he's got,
Yeah. What I like about this is that everybody, like, you're bouncing between just different users at Merion, and you're seeing that you've got totally different dashboards and how things are set up, and it's really just you customize it to the person.
Yeah. Stuck on something here. Sorry. Come on, mouse, move for me. We get a chance to see all our users here.
Yeah, Sean, I've been on his and I've seen it, and I know he collects.
Well, I'm going to show you this, John, just because something just happened since you've probably looked at it last. It's a pretty special one. He's completely automated with his water now, and it's blowaway. So it's pond levels. It's monitoring literally the transportation of it from the pond to the irrigation pump station, and then he's got the. This is slow, and I think it's because of the webinar portion of this. Hold on. Apologize to the viewers on this, but
plus I know when we run Google Hangouts and you're running, I do it a lot for photography, and I'm running heavy programs in the background. It tends to drag, so it's Google's issue for the Hangouts.
Yeah, you can see he set up a soil tissue report. And this is, you're not seeing it holistically here on the screen, and I'm totally frozen. Oh.
Yeah, it's probably the Hangout that's screwing things up. That's what ends up happening a lot when we try and share screens. I try not to share too much.
If I can get this one up, then we can move on. But I'm not moving at all on this right now.
Yeah, well, why don't you? Oh, there it is.
Have it on here yet. Here we go. So this is he has this on. By the end of this next week, he'll have it now on all of his golf courses. Plus, he'll have it in one page. What was a manual input there for a period of time. This is all his Flowtronics. He has 6 separate pump stations, and then he has from 3 different ponds. He's pumping water to those 6 different irrigation pump stations, and that's what he's seeing automated now, and he'll start setting up his alerts and alarms towards his flow and his rates, and then he mixes it up as well. He has the ability to do his kilowatts because he's moving so much water. He does have a real expense with his electricity and his energy on this, and that's an interest that's his lake level. So, out there in the desert with the high ET, that's essentially his inventory supply, and then he essentially has a supply chain management program, because the water comes up from Scottsdale, they pump it up, he puts it in the holding ponds, and because of ET, he's got to monitor those levels very carefully, and then he moves it out. And when he irrigates, and the time of the day he irrigates, because of kilowatts, and again, I don't really know how many golf courses have his extremities in terms of the cost to move, the energy. But I guess it's relevant, right?
Oh yeah, he tries to pump off peak.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm just scrolling down here so you can see he set this up with an overview. He's got each golf course. This On Golf thing is just where we're able to. It's a play site for us that without messing up his data. Got water management. He has a water power nexus here, and then he's got some soil agronomy stuff on his dashboard. I'll just pop this up if I can, just real quick, just so you can see an overview for anybody who's watching. It's pretty similar, except for it's just more golf courses than what Matt's been doing. He's got correlations. He takes he selects different greens from the different courses, and here's one of them, Chiricahua, where he's doing a representative green for number 1, and then he's looking at moisture and firmness and speed and his water output, and then he'll do the same thing for the next golf course, similar correlations between playing conditions, speed and water output, and then he'll take representative greens from each course and put 1 metric, so that's firmness, and he'll do the same thing for speed, and he'll do the same things for moisture. So No right or wrong on any of this stuff. It's just what he's interested in, how he's measured. One thing that everybody has in common so far, from Matt to Sean, and they're extremely different environments, and this is a big point, is they're both focused on, in my opinion, two things, and this is good for the game of golf. They're focused on how do I optimize consistently my playing conditions, and I want to monitor that, and I want to have a metric. So Matt is developing a metrics. I think he has something in his mind. Sean put it out there in his season, which was in January. He's like, you know what? I'm going to see if I can get 11.6 consistently for everyday play on all 108 holes. It's a big ask, right? And with a plus or minus tolerance. And I want to have firmness with a plus or minus tolerance within the bandwidth of 0.35. So that was his goal. He said, that if I can do that consistently, I know A, I'm going to have a lot of happy members, but I want to make Bob Jones, who's my GM, happy. I want to bring down my water costs while I'm doing that. And the only way he was able to do that was really through what you're seeing on the screen right now. He set up correlations. It's all about the correlations of those outputs, both the playing conditions outputs, those influencers, which is the weather, primarily the soil, and then as you can see, he does clipping. If you see this, he does a clipping yield. Matt looks at it from a mowing height perspective. It's just another way to evaluate that data. And he was able to reduce, this is a real number, John, he was able to reduce his water output by close to 10% while giving those consistent playing conditions, and the dollars and cents value to that was close to $40,000, $40,000, at $38,000 and change to be exact. So Matt has a higher playing standard because of Merion being Merion and all the great USGA events and all the history, and the expectation from members and their guests are, we want it really fast and we want it very firm, and so that's acceptable. Would not be acceptable, quite frankly, in Sean's environment. It would create a lot of havoc with slow play and just the enjoyment factor. But it's okay at Merion. So he's doing that, and I look at the common thread here for the market is he's bringing down his costs. You're not spending more money so far with On Golf because you're looking at this. You're so far you've brought down your spend, right?
Significantly.
Well, we have about 5 minutes left. What I want to do is get you off a screen share, and I want to kind of follow up with I guess my final question, and you can address this, is so what are the challenges now to bring this to, it's already to market, but what are the challenges and barriers? What does it take to get this on as many golf courses and collect this data? Because as you said, it's a data cloud data software service. To me, that's powerful. All that data is powerful, and the more users you have, it's going to benefit them individually. But you can actually really start to fine-tune management of golf on this. So what do you see as some of the potential or the challenges going forward?
Well, a couple things. One is just quickly, because I didn't mention it up front. What we're trying to do is to bring down the cost of golf. I mean, why are we doing this? Why did I jump back into this thing? And besides, Matt saying golf's ready for this, golf's too expensive, and the industry has some real challenges. We have attrition in the game with rounds. More people leaving than coming in to play the game. You have private clubs losing money. If you look at the 17,000 plus in the United States, it's not a pretty picture. There are bubbles. We all know the bubbles. I just mentioned 2 clubs that are certainly within that bubble, but that represents a very low percentage of this marketplace. So, the overall program here is through information and insight that's used readily and widely accepted in, frankly, just about any other industry that I know of. And the fact that the farmer, which has very similar, almost exact inputs to grow crop that the superintendent does, this makes sense, and they're making money off this, which means they're reducing their costs, their inputs. Every input that they have, from equipment to labor to soil to fertilizers to chemicals to water, they're bringing down their costs. So it can happen in golf. With that in mind, the biggest challenge we have is the mindset. And the way we're going about changing that mindset is working initially with who we classify as the early adopters. We're the first 2 years of 2015 and 2016. We'll be very focused on the superintendents that want and accept change to be better at what they do. And the good news for us is there's a lot of them out there, and they're not all within the bubble. They're not necessarily all the high-end budget clubs. We just successfully closed out a program, and our budget mix was tremendous. We have public courses that came on board, and we have some lower to mid-budget private clubs that came into the subscription program. So we're going to expand upon that in 2015, and how this will morph into the mass will be the values, the quantifiable values that come from those different operators in the different regions of the countries. Because as we know, this is a neighborhood business. What goes on in Southern California, they care about in Southern California. What goes on in Dallas, Texas, they care about it in Dallas, Texas, and the same thing with the Philadelphia market and the North Carolina market, et cetera. So we're building the regional, essentially role models and quantifying the various savings while they continue to perform, conditions-wise at a very high level.
Yeah, and I think that's probably, well, I mean, I'm on the outside of it. I think it's a good place to start. I know that you've let us into it at Penn State, and that I'm getting ready to start pull some data, because to me the data is the most important part of it. I mean, the money savings is good for Matt, the time saving is good for superintendents, but from my standpoint, data is powerful. So I'm looking forward to getting into that. I've got another conference in 2 minutes that I have to get on, so I have to cut us off. But what I did want to do is give both of you a last-minute opportunity to just say any closing remarks, or maybe provide the website for people where they can go see it. I'll put it in the notes of the YouTube. But I appreciate you guys being on here, and give the floor to you for the last comments.
Yeah, thank you. So website, just for anybody who wants to reach out, we have an info on our website. It's ongolfusa.com. And we do have a newsletter that we're going to start pushing out on a weekly basis. So if anybody's interested in participating in that, reach out through the info on Golf USA, and we'll make sure that you're part of that thread.
Yeah, and we just encourage anybody that has somebody that's close to you utilizing it. Reach out to them and see if you can go over there. And the testing portion is not nearly. Some people are actually scared of that, I think, and it's really not as overwhelming as you think. For instance, real quickly, it takes us 6 minutes to do our data collection per green, and first thing we do is stick a soil thermometer in there and let it sit, and then we divide our greens into 3 sections, and we take 3 measurements per section: firmness, and then moisture, and then we come back and do our green speed. So it's 6 minutes a green.
You're putting it they're putting that measurement right into OnGolf in the field.
Right, with an iPad. We don't do the writing down anymore. It's all done. Just skip that whole process, and then come back to the office and look at it and move it around however we want.
Are you utilizing the alerts very much at this point?
We do. Our alerts are a little comical, possibly to other people. When our for instance, our green speed alert is when it goes under 12, we're alarmed, and certainly when it goes over 15, I get alarmed. So, but speeds.
His firmness reading alert though is when it's harder than concrete.
Well, actually harder than a valve box lid. But I mean, it's the soil moisture is really the thing that I seem to hone in on the most, because for me, that's where I start to get nervous, and that's the only thing I can really control when we're trying to control disease. Try to keep the soil moistures under double digits, and if we can do that, then I'm not as concerned about my nighttime temperatures.
Sorry, I'm tweeting out to people and doing all kinds of stuff. But yeah, I think that I'll probably try and write a blog post or something about this, just talking about how we've used it or how we were ultimately going to use it for our research, because I do think that having this data is incredibly powerful, and if that data can be utilized in an easy way, in other words, they can get to the data, enter it easy, or have it automated, it's going to really, I think, change the way turf either costs or playability are going to impact things, and I think that's huge. I mean, that to me is good for the game of golf. So with that, we'll sign off. But I want to thank you both for coming on. And Tom, I saw you were on there. You're muted. Sorry that we had some problems, but we had to get started. But yeah, I look forward to seeing how this thing kind of plays out over 2015 and moving into 2016 as well. So with that, I'm going to say goodbye, and thanks for everybody that watched, and we'll see you next time when we have another show. I don't know who our next guest is, but I'll tweet that out later too. And Matt and Walt, I'll put links in the YouTube video in the comment section there. I'll put links to all the stuff that was mentioned here too, so that people can get to the website.
Great. Thank you, John.
Thank you, John.
Nice chatting with you.
All right, thanks. Appreciate it. All right, bye.